agenda or?
No.
Okay, I'm
Who's going to end up doing?
your mic's on.
Yeah, I know. I'm thinking about my Pledge of Allegiance victim. All right. Good to go?
Maria Army Stupid.
Oh, yeah. It'd be a great idea.
Not a practice.
She's smiling. She doesn't know why yet.
No, she doesn't.
I'm laughing. You'll find out in a minute. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. DeSilva,
Here.
Mrs. Gillis,
Here.
Mr. Melody,
Here.
Mrs. Rigby,
Here.
and Mr. Valentine.
Here. Pledge of Allegiance. Maria, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Welcome, Maria. Approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Melody. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Rigby. Questions or comments? There being none, call the roll, please.
Mr. Melody,
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby,
Yes.
Mrs. DeSilva,
Yes.
Mrs. Gillis,
Yes.
and Mr. Valentine.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Board President, Board of Education comments. Sure that we'll have some discussion as we go down the agenda here, but I do not have anything this evening. All right, moving on to public participation. No notice on that side of things. And superintendent's recommendation.
I'd just like to say before Mr. Kern makes his formal recommendation that as an administrative team, we take tonight's recommendation incredibly seriously. We know that our Dublin taxpayers and our Dublin community has tremendous support for our schools. And we also know, as we've adopted our 5-year forecast, that we cannot continue business as usual without a recommendation to generate additional revenue. We know that both finances and facilities are driving the conversations as we see continued growth in parts of our district. Yesterday, I had a meeting about the potential of between 300 and 2,000 units at Dublin Village. Housing units up there. The city is talking about Metro Place. It's not just our northwest quadrant. We are experiencing growth, and we are the destination district in Central Ohio. So as we begin this process, today is step 1. Our next meeting will be step 2, and our team will be working diligently over the next several weeks so that at the August board meeting, we can bring to the Board of Education a list of what our schools will look like with voter approval and a specific list of things that will happen if the levy request is rejected. When we talk about transparency, we will be ultimately clear about the district's needed response depending on how our voters decide to fund our district. Mr. Kern and I, as your Chief Financial Officer and Chief Executive Officer throughout this process, will only share facts, and we will only share what the board approves with our community, because ultimately this is the ultimate part of democracy. Our voters get to choose the type of school district they want to have moving forward. And we will clearly lay out what happens with approval and what happens if this recommendation is rejected. And our plan is to have that at the first August board meeting for our board and for our community.
All right, move to treasurer's recommendation and then discussion from there.
Thank you, Mr. Valentine. And Dr. Marshausen kind of took what I was going to say a little bit there, but as our the need where we're at today, I'm just going to talk about the issue in general that is on here that you're voting on. This is a two-step process with the next step, if passage tonight, where we need a supermajority of at least 4 to pass, would be then the next vote would be on July 17th at our regularly scheduled meeting. I will say this process starts, like I said, the first vote, and really the big part is this certifies what we forward to the Franklin County Auditor, and they fill out a couple of forms. I believe it's DTE, Department of Taxation 140 and 130R, or 140R and 131, or something like that. I forget exactly, but to certify the amounts and amount of this levied as of currently to that point, that then we insert into the next resolution that you would, to what's called to proceed, which would be to proceed with the ballot language that would be presented, and then we would then file with the Franklin County Board of Elections. This also starts the process too, since we do have a bond issue on here, of getting approvals through the Ohio Department of Education and the Department of Taxation. So this is a process to get it started in that format. Just to kind of go over the two different aspects, Dr. Marshausen talked about the operating levy, which is the 5-year forecast in that essence. That would be 7.9 mils. And just from a historical basis, that is in line with previous asks throughout the last 30 to 40 years. So from that standpoint, so that is nothing unusual from there. And also this would mean for the taxpayers out there, for people who are valuing their house, for example, per each 100,000 of appraised value, that would be $276.50. I'm not sure exactly where we're at. I'll work with the Franklin County Auditor on getting that information of where our average home value was. The last time I believe we were in the low 330, 340 in 2018. So, for example, with home values and residential values increase, and let's say, for example, it's an average value is $400,000, that would be $1,100 approximately. So, just kind of from a standpoint from that, but it's $276.50 per 100,000 of appraised value. So, with that. Also is a $145 million bond issue. The bond issue, just for this, we will call it no new millage, but you will see millage attached to it by the county auditor because they are required to by law to do that, they kind of see it as a standalone issue and what it would take to make sure we pay the debt service related to that. But as we've done, I don't know, many times over the last 20 to 30 years, the no new millage concept will be there again. What will allow us to do is issue $145 million on bonds and not raise the taxpayers' expense for the debt service and, in this case, also PI amounts. So the only new monies that we would be asking for, or I say new additional taxes, would be on the operating of the 7.9 mils. So just for the $145 million, you've gotten a list of projects with Mr. Stark to kind of from a building improvements, athletic improvements. But the two key things in this issue will be construction of Elementary 15 and the preschool addition with that also. So any questions on the ballot language itself or ballot issue? I'll open it up.
Just real quick, because some may look at this as a random Thursday evening, and I know that we cover this, but for the sake of the public, the reason that we are initiating this process now is because statutorily or from election law, we need to initiate it at this point.
Yeah, you are definitely correct. So we do have to file with ODE, I believe, by, I think it was July 10th. So that's one thing that necessitated this too. But then with the approvals, all this had needed to be done. Again, for the second approval with ODE, once the Franklin County certifies and you go during the proceed, has to be by August 1st, and I believe the other deadline to file with the Franklin County Board of Elections is August the 8th. So that necessitates this in the special meeting. We only had one regularly scheduled meeting, which is July 17th. So there again, that's why we've added the special meeting. We did send out, you only required to have 24 hours notice. We did send out on Friday the notice of this meeting for July the 6th. last Friday, June 30th, I'm sorry. So,
Additional questions?
Yes, so it's not really a question because I know the answer to this, but if you could just speak to, for those who might not know, why it's advantageous to go on the ballot in November versus March, as we had talked about before, just as far as collecting the
Yep.
funds and that kind of thing.
Mrs. De Silva, there's probably more than a couple of reasons too. There's one, too, is we talked about construction of the elementary number 15. That allows us, with passing of that, to get, we've already kind of started that process with design and different other things, but this would definitely ensure we could issue the bonds and then get the construction started in a very timely manner, with construction timelines and costs increasing every day. That allows for that to make sure that gets done, so that would then open in the fall of August of 25. Yes, August of 25. So we then could have that congestion that we have up, especially at Abraham Depp in the northwest quadrant there, and help those northwest buildings out. That's one. Two, November is also, if you recall, that would be the last time we could go for this year. And we could start then collecting in the next year, the next January of 2024. If we were to wait a year, you lose a whole year's worth of collection. And then you would probably, not quite double, but you're looking at a very significant double-digit levy request. That is just, it's not a good thing for our taxpayers, so from that standpoint. But I will also say, from that standpoint too, is we like to wait until, I don't want to say the very last moment, but we want to extend as best as possible, long as possible. 2018, it was 6 years from the previous one, and this will be 5 years, where consistently we've been 3 and 4 years. And this one, just from that standpoint, we would say last definitely 3, but we'll definitely push for 4 years in that thing to come back and ask. I will also say, too, is we expect voter turnout to be a little higher, even though it's an off-election year typically. Typically, you like to go in that presidential election type cycle. But also, too, voter turnout's usually a good thing from a passage standpoint, but with the abortion thing probably going to be on the ballot in November, we'll have, we anticipate would have great voter turnout from that standpoint. Anything I'm missing, John? I think from that standpoint, and also too is with November is if unfortunately we were not able to pass, that gives us time as we go into the following school year to we're going to come to you in August with those reductions, but then that also allows us to start implementing and reviewing again, implementing as we go into the next school year, or as much as we can soon as possible.
Any additional questions or comments?
Just one more of a reminder or clarification. So if and when this is passed, it is basically a fixed dollar amount. So as home valuation does increase, our collection does not increase along with that.
Yeah, so for example, the typical homeowner, and we have, I mean, as a matter of fact, I think John had a speaking engagement this week. We kind of show the effect of House Bill 920, which we do get, especially going through reappraisal right now for Franklin and Delaware counties. You'll see, for example, the 2018, we had a 2 mil permanent improvement levy that is now only being collected at 1.68 mils. So what happens is as property values increase, those voted millage gets rolled back. Now I've talked about inside millage, which ours is 4.4 mils that we do get increases on within the general fund, but that's only a small portion of, we have over 85 voted mills out there, Mr. Melody. So, but we're only collecting at like 43 of those mills, so.
All right, thank you.
just to be clear for anyone in the public who watches this, we've had substantial discussion about all of the items that are a part of both the bond and levy here, multiple presentations which are available online and through the school district as well from a transparency standpoint, which kind of leads me to my last thing as we get to the vote. How are we presenting and/or housing information for the public as well as communicating it out via email and social?
Right now, there's a new tab on our website titled Dublin Facts, the press release for tonight, and all information pertaining to our finances involving this request from our voters will be housed on Dublin Facts. It will serve as a frequently asked question site and also an opportunity for us to correct misinformation that we hear during the process, so that our team will work together to make sure that we're able to provide the facts in a place that all of our community members can go for correct, accurate information, because we know that Facebook probably isn't where you find accurate information. We want to be the source of what's accurate.
Just a clarification on that, it is Know the Facts on the
Know the
website.
facts. There you go.
I just have one question. It's for Mr. Stark, actually. Well, I guess both of you, but on that Dublin Facts page, one of the things I found interesting from the finance meetings is the cost per square foot for a new elementary school now versus Depp and Hopewell costs. And I wondered if you would just share those, and I wonder if they will be available on that Dublin Facts page.
Sure. I might not be quoting them exact, but Brian maybe can. It was when we built the two other elementary schools, this is back in 2018, 2019, it was roughly $300 per square foot. And now the new elementary is going to cost roughly about $515 per square foot. And this is, and obviously what's driving costs, one, there's many things driving costs, inflation amongst the top one, but Central Ohio is a huge hub of activity, not just for residential, but for commercial construction. With the onset of Intel coming here, Honda's building more things here, Amazon and Google are both opening up more warehousing and data centers over here. Getting competitive bids gets to be more and more competitive. So both some infrastructure items like steel, like windows, like roofs, like HVAC, not only has that gone up, but in the Central Ohio area, labor has significantly gone up. So this is the price that we're at. So one of the things that Mr. Kern said, to add on to the reasons of November, no one has a crystal ball, but the way that the graph has been going, the more we wait, costs right now are increasing. Now, no one knows what the federal government do with interest rates, this, that, and the other, but right now it's an increasing piece.
And I'll give Mr. Stark credit in this sense, too. And the one other thing, too, is, for example, the preschool edition, just because of the size of the scale of it, we're probably over $600 per square foot for that one. But one of the things they have done is not only looked at construction managers and what their costs would be, architect and what their costs would be, and it's gotten 3 different kind of areas where we've looked and to try to get, as we plan out this bond package, to make sure that we have adequately have enough available for that. What we don't want to run into, and I think some districts probably have run across the state with it, and I can't pinpoint any for sure, but is the rising construction costs have caught them a little bit in their planning, where they may have planned, like Mr. Stark is already going through the process now and be ready, shovel ready essentially. Kind of once we passed is they may have waited, maybe didn't start the design until later. Now they might have designed a bond issue around one set of costs, and now with rising construction, their kind of costs. So then they really have to look at value engineering and trying to get the project done, A, on time, but B, within the cost parameters that they have.
All right. There being no more questions, we will move on to the resolution. It's recommended by the treasurer that the Board of Education approve the attached resolution declaring necessity of bond issue and levies of a tax in excess of the 10 mil limitation, and to submit the question of such issue to the electors and requesting state consents in connection therewith. Ohio Revised Code 5705.218.133.06. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. De Silva. Is there a second?
A second?
Second by Mr. Melody. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. De Silva,
Yes.
Mr. Melody,
Yes.
Mrs. Rigby,
Yes.
Mrs. Gillis,
Yes.
and Mr. Valentine.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. HR.
So, good evening, members of the board. So our section is pretty small tonight, but as we get toward July 10th, we've just got a resignation, one new hire and a salary change, and then a leave of absence. So we're getting toward that date where we'll be fully staffed, and that's all that we have on tonight. Plus, we have one supplemental item, which is an academic supplemental, but that's all that we have on tonight's agenda.
Any questions? All right. It's recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve item 7A. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Rigby. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. De Silva. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Rigby,
Yes.
Mrs. De Silva,
Yes.
Mr. Melody,
Yes.
Mrs. Gillis,
Yes.
and Mr. Valentine.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. That said, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved?
Moved by Mr. Melody. Is there a second?
Second.
Give a second to Mrs. Gillis. Let her get in on this. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed, motion passes 5-0. Thank you.